All right, today's video is all about accountability and how someone can help hold you accountable so that you actually hit and achieve your goals. So this came up for me. I run a Facebook group called Fake Girl Magic, and I asked people, I said, hey, what does accountability look like for you? And I got a myriad of answers. And one answer I got back was like, well, I hold myself accountable. And I'm like, okay. I said, so does that mean that you are hitting your goals? And she's like, well, and it was crickets. And so what accountability is, when it comes to, say, like if it was like a crime and someone threw a brick through your window, you'd be like, I want that person to be held accountable, right? That's clear. You know exactly what it is. Someone committed a crime. You want them to pay for that crime. But when it comes to our health, our fitness, hitting our, business goals, life goals, financial goals, there isn't really a person out there that does that. And, some of us are very self-motivated and some of us aren't. And when I see in the health and fitness space, what we have is an implementation problem. So many of you come to a coaching, you know that maybe you're eating a little bit too much. You know that maybe you need to move a little bit more. You know that maybe you need to sleep a little bit more. You know that you're stressed to the max. Whatever it is, you know what's going on. But somehow you can't get from here to here, right? Some of us just get caught in that struggle tornado, right? We're either stuck with being perfect. We're stuck with, emotional eating. We're stuck with, as a mom, trying to figure out like all the things that being a mom encompasses. We're stuck with, we've been told for so long that we have to struggle in order to get success, right? So many of us get caught in those those limiting mindsets. And so when it comes to really getting clear on what you want and thinking that holy shit, could it really be possible? We struggle. We're like, ooh, I don't know. It's for other people, not for me. And so one of the things that I really, work a lot with my clients, way more than saying, how many grams of carbs to eat, it's really telling them that giving them permission to break free from the struggle, right? There's a program that's out there, Hard 75. And it makes me crazy because if you don't do all the things, you got to go back to the beginning. And I'm like, how is that empowering? It takes a very special person to be able to do, I think it's like 10 things every day. And if you don't do all 10 things, you have to start again. And for many people, that's been what they get stuck in, right? For my perfect Pams out there, if you don't do things perfectly, if you don't do all the things, you're like, shit, see you Monday, right? So it just helps you stay into that pattern where one of the things I like to help my clients break free of is the struggle, is that you don't have to do 5 million things that a diet tells you to do. It's really starting to say, what is gonna work for me right now, right? What's gonna work for my season of my life? You might be in a very busy work season and the thought of, doing 2 workouts a day and reading and this and you're just like, shit, I just can't get that done. That's okay, right? Bruce Lee, if you don't know who Bruce Lee is, he was a Chinese kung fu fighter. And he was very famous for saying, take what you need and leave the rest. And that has been a game changer for me in my fitness journey and just in my life, because I was stuck in that pattern too, that I had to do, my workouts had to look like this. My food had to look like this. Everything had to be at a specific level or it didn't count. And that made me, I just always would ruminate about why I couldn't be perfect, why I couldn't do it this way. And I remember going to an event and they talked about Bruce Lee and he said, take what you need, leave the rest. And I was like, yeah. I was like, coconut to the head moment, right? That's what needs to happen. So instead of thinking that I have to do all 10 of these things over and over and over and over again, I need to say, I need to cherry pick what feels good for me right now in this moment, so that I'm no longer feeling like I have to always like work hard and struggle, that I can say, you know what, this can be easy. This could be effortless. Yes, it can be effortless. So one of the biggest places that I work with my clients is time management. You know, so many of us just try to cram so much into the day, and then, you know, spend most of the night beating ourselves up about what we didn't get done that day, and like how we're going to make up for it the next day or the next, you know, few days. And so that we get stuck and we don't really make decisions anymore, because we're still paralyzed by all the things that we didn't do in previous iterations. I also work with them about sustainability, right? You know, many diets out there are all about, you know, get this, you know, lose this many pounds in this many days. And, you know, my biggest question has always been, what happens if it's 30 days? What happens on day 31? What do you do? How has this become ingrained in a lifestyle? And one of the things I love to teach my clients about is, how do we make this work for you? How does this become a lifestyle? Right? The purpose of this video is to say, for you to start thinking to yourself, like, okay, what is it that I want? So that we can get crystal clear about what we want, so that we can start to make more informed choices. Because when we start to make more informed choices, that's when we can start to say to ourselves, okay, this is what I want. Now it becomes clear. Like, it's crystal clear. And now that I can take myself and bring myself down the path to get a little bit more creative, right? Let those creative juices flow, so that it's not always like the diet has to be hard and I always have to starve and I always have to be at the gym and come home and not be able to lift my hands above my head, right? That's when I start to get all of that. And then I start to connect with my body and start to feel like, what do I feel like inside? Do I need food, or am I just eating because I've been programmed that I need to eat every X number of hours, right? So that finally I start to create the Kim plan, the me plan, so that it's no matter where I am, I'm no longer panicked. I'm not panicked about going out to dinner. I'm not panicked about going to someone else's house. I'm not panicked if someone brings chips over and am I gonna lose my shit, right? I'm no longer focused on that, because I'm like, you know what? I have my own internal strength. And so one of the biggest things that I work with clients about is like, how do we, you know, create your own plan so that you always know the best choices, right, for you in that moment, and that you don't feel like you're gonna always be hanging off the edge of the I lost my shit cliff, right? You know, we all know that place where you're just like one bite away, and next thing you know, you're like, you know, face up in a 7-Eleven parking lot with a Suzy Q, you know, on the top of your head, right? If this has ever happened to you, awesome. You know, so here's what I know. Like, what does accountability look like for you? Do me a favor, leave me a comment below, because I really want to know. Like, this is where I think many of you struggle, is that you know all the stuff, you have all the stuff, but we're not taking the next level to implement. And so what's keeping you from that implementation, right? What do you need to continue down the road to happy and healthy lifestyle? I'm anxious to hear. See you later.